Well, hello everybody, and welcome to what is, I guess, a bit of a milestone in our journey down the road to somewhere. Today we will end season 4. We've been in season 4 for quite a while. We've been through the state of Oklahoma, and today we will be hitting the last stop in Oklahoma, which is Texola. Right on the very border. Let's get a little bit of a picture up here. There we go. Right on the very western border of Oklahoma. Last stop in Oklahoma, and it's also the last of 17 prophets that we have been through as we've gone through the state of Oklahoma. And even a bigger milestone today is that as of today, when we finish this final book of the prophets, we will have been through every book of the Old Testament. So for those of you that have kind of hung in there through this whole time and have done all of the episodes and some of the teaching ones, hopefully also, congratulations. You, again, have got some kind of a grasp on every book of the Old Testament. I know a few of you that I talked with actually this week were probably tuning in for the first time, and just, you can go back and look at any of the videos from this time that we've been in the Old Testament. They're all available on YouTube, and if you get into the Telos website by going to bobbeltz.com and then to videos and to playlists, just look for the playlist for The Road to Somewhere. So anyway, it's pretty amazing that we've made it through the whole Old Testament. We're going to take a break, and I think I told you this before, with Easter coming up and everything that seems to go on around Easter. We're going to take a break the month of April. We're in Lent right now. And we'll be coming up not too long from now on Palm Sunday and the Passion Week and the Crucifixion on Good Friday, and then finally Resurrection Day on Easter. So, if you are behind, this will give you a good time to catch up. And then the plan is that probably in May, we're going to do another, quote, season, and it'll be a short season because we're going to be going through the panhandle of Texas, and we'll be hooked up with the Gospels. So there's only 4 sessions really in this next season. We'll probably try and get through that in May. And so in May, we'll have a chance to look at both the life and story of Jesus. And that will be the beginning, ultimately, of 27 stops, the books of the New Testament, and we'll be going through 4 states: Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. So got that to look forward to as we move on down the line and down the road on Route 66. Today, we are going to be heading out of Eric, Oklahoma. That's, remember, where Joy and John have been, and there in Eric they were hanging out with Harley at the Sandhills Curiosity Shop. This is his wife Annabelle, who passed away a few years ago. By the way, the one thing that we didn't talk about is that Eric likes to pride itself on being the redneck capital of the world, and just kind of a crazy stop here along the way. Only 6 miles from Eric, really to the border of Oklahoma and Texas. And again, today where we will be is that we're going to be in the small town of Texola, which is right on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. Pretty much a small town. I don't want to call it a ghost town because let me go back here for a second. it does have a population of about 36 people, and for a long time there wasn't much really to look at there in Texola. There's an old rundown gas station that's been abandoned. There was kind of an abandoned bar there, and that has been taken over and turned into a pretty decent place called the Tumbleweed Grill, and has a shop attached to it. But if you stop at the Tumbleweed Grill, one of the things they're known for is if you get a hamburger there, the bun actually has the logo of Route 66 grilled into the top of the bun, and so you can get yourself a Route 66 burger, I guess. And then the other thing that it has is it's got this funky little one-room jail that was built back in the 1800s. And Joy and John decide that what they're going to do is shoot their video from this little jail. And so they park the vet, and John gets out, and they get all set up to shoot their video. In the video, John tells how the town's been both a part of Texas and a part of Oklahoma. The 100th meridian that actually separates Texas from Oklahoma runs through this little town of Texola. So there were times in its history where it was part of Texas and times in its history where it was part of Oklahoma. So I guess you could say with the meridian running right through and now the town being part of Oklahoma, that you just couldn't get any closer to Texas than you can and still be in the state of Oklahoma. So John gives a little bit of background on all of that, talks a little bit about this one-room jail. He's actually going to tie the jail into the book that he's going to be talking about that is paired up with this little town of Texola. So he segues into what is actually the last book of the Old Testament, and that is the book of Malachi. Malachi begins this way. Let me take you to the very first verse. First of all, let's show again how it fits in with the rest of the minor prophets. And again, you can see that it's clear down here on the very end, and it really, the subject matter of the book has a lot to do with the fact that there's been some period of time, we think, that has elapsed since the time when the city has pretty much been rebuilt. The walls have been rebuilt by Nehemiah. Again, it is part of the prophets of the return from exile. But timing-wise, we think, we know that it's between like 450 and 400 when the book was written, and probably the best estimate is around 420, which again, timing-wise, makes it the last of the Old Testament books. Interesting, and I wasn't really familiar with this until I did some research this week. I think in the longer video, I make a mistake where I say that the name Malachi means something like God remembers. I honestly don't know where I picked that up, because the debate is whether or not there actually was a person named Malachi, and whether or not this was just more of a title than actually the name of someone that wrote the book, because Malachi, the root of Malachi is the word messenger, which also happens to be the root of the word angel. And so there are many that believe that really what's being said here in the first verse of Malachi is that the writer is saying a prophecy or an oracle, the word of the Lord to Israel, and then some versions actually have written by the hand of his messenger. That's the way the Septuagint translates this first verse. And in Jewish tradition, and also some Orthodox Christianity, The actual author of the book, it's attributed to Ezra, and that would fit with the time period we're talking about, sort of the later period of Nehemiah, where the walls have been rebuilt and the city is kind of in place. There's nowhere else in the Old Testament, by the way, where anyone is named Malachi, which is another reason why some just feel like it's more of a title than actually naming the author of the book. So we don't know exactly, but it's interesting. I'd never actually heard that before until I was working on it this week. So again, around 420, what's happened here is that we've got a new generation. Again, think about the fact that this is at least 100 years from the time when the first of the exiles returned and rebuilt the temple. And there's a good chance that that many of the people that are now living there in Jerusalem that are returned from exile are a new generation that really didn't experience much of what the previous generation experienced, and it seems to have had an impact upon sort of the spiritual life of the community, and that there's been some sort of a spiritual slide, and almost all of the issues that the prophets have had to deal with through the years in terms of Israel getting off track. Here they are after their captivity. They're back in Jerusalem. Things have been rebuilt, and yet many of the same issues have arisen again. And it's to those issues that this last and short letter is addressed. 4 chapters, so it's pretty short. And it's interesting. One brief summary of the book that I read described it this way: a priesthood that is forgetful, a temple that is underfunded, a society where Jewish men divorce their wives and marry outside the faith. I actually think that's a pretty tame definition. Because the language of the text is a lot stronger. I think God seems to be mad at what's going on there, and he expresses that. But, if you can kind of remember that each chapter seems to have a main theme, and some of them you're familiar with. So maybe you aren't too familiar with the first, where what you have is you have priests that are now offering blemished sacrifices, and basically what they're doing is they're dishonoring God. I speak quite a bit about that in the teaching video, but again, so the very first message from God is addressed toward the priests. Secondly, there's a passage about divorce in here. And what we think is happening, and again in the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, we see that many of the exiles that have come back have actually married foreign women, which was forbidden in the law. And now what we get a sense of is that perhaps oftentimes what was happening is they were divorcing their Jewish wives and marrying wives from the nations around Israel. And so God speaks to the fact that they have violated this covenant that they have made with the wives of their youth. And probably one of the more famous texts, and again, a little more explanation on the teaching video, is where God says, "I hate divorce." And by the way, I go into some detail where I try to explain that that doesn't mean that God hates divorced people. It's just that he hates what happens when that covenant that's been made, the covenant of marriage, goes through the kinds of, I think, the kinds of issues that it goes through that ultimately lead to divorce. Another part of Malachi, and again, I'm pointing a lot of this out because John in the book just kind of zeroes in on one of the issues. The issue he zeroes in on is he says that people have been robbing God. And in the text, God confronts the people and says, will a mere mortal rob God, yet you rob me? And he goes on to explain that the way that they are robbing him is that they aren't giving the full tithe. If you were a Jew at the time of Malachi and before, all the way back to the time of Abraham, and then when the law was given, it was expected that 1/10 of all of your crops and produce and herds, that 1/10 annually would be given to the temple. That's really how the Levites that took care of the temple lived. And what we see here in the book is not only are the priests offering blemished sacrifices, they aren't giving their best, but that the people themselves are not bringing in the full tithe. And there's great promise, of course, in the book where God says if you'd bring in the full tithe, that he would open the floodgates of heaven and pour out blessing on them. One of the questions is, this is a promise that's made to Israel. How much does that apply to Christians today? Some Christians think it does, and that tithing, you'll hear that spoken of often probably in churches. Although the New Testament has a different perspective on giving. And again, I go into some detail on that in the teaching tape. Let me just say that I think that the tithe is not what the New Testament teaches for believers. I think it teaches generosity. And generosity probably in most cases should exceed the tithe. But there's a whole different twist on things, I think, in the New Testament than there is in the Old Testament. But it's a well-known text. And then finally, the final message of the book of Malachi is that it really talks about the coming of the day of the Lord, which we would probably think of as the second coming of Christ, and how that God is going to send Elijah before that day, and that Elijah will play an instrumental role in the coming of the day of the Lord. And of course, this is something when Jesus is questioned about that, when people begin to think, are you the Messiah? Well, what about Elijah? And Jesus makes a statement, well, Elijah has come, and it's a reference to John the Baptist, who in some way has fulfilled that prophecy that is given at the end of Malachi. So again, lots of things are getting ready to happen to Israel. This is sort of the end. So the people have gotten off track again. God has to deal and challenge them again, and basically, call them back to get on track and to get serious and to quit dishonoring him, which they have. And much will take place between this point in time and the beginning of the New Testament. As a matter of fact, at the time this is written, Israel is a vassal state of the Persian Empire, and it's the Persian kings that have sent the exiles back to rebuild the city. And in around 300 BC, the Persians are going to be defeated by Alexander the Great, and Israel will come under the authority of Alexander and the Greek Empire. Alexander dies. He divides up his kingdom between 4 of his generals, and Israel kind of sits right between 2 of those generals, the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, and gets bounced back and forth quite a bit. And we read a little bit about that in the books that aren't part of our canon, the Protestant canon, that are called the Apocrypha. There are pieces of history there that deal with this intertestamental period. And of course, eventually, the Romans will conquer that whole territory, so that by the time we open the New Testament, it's the Roman Empire that now controls Israel. I have a whole teaching on that intertestamental period, and between today, when we finish the Old Testament, and May, when we pick up the Gospels, I'll send you out a link to that sometime during the month of April, so that if you are interested in that, you can get sort of a feel for what happens in that period of time. In the video, John kind of makes a reference as he's standing in front of the jail, and talks a little bit about how people that were guilty of robbery would be jailed, and then he talks about the biggest robbery in human history, which is the fact that Israel says that you are, God says that you are robbing me by not giving a tithe. So he ties that together, talks a little bit about the promise that comes to Israel with bringing in the full tithe, and sort of wraps up the book of Malachi that way. So what happens now is that John and Joy, they're going to leave Oklahoma. This is actually a picture of the state line with Route 66 there, and they're going to head into Texas. Their first stop is going to be Shamrock, Texas, and the first book that we'll be looking at in the New Testament is the book of Matthew, and we'll have 4 weeks where we look at the life of Jesus. So those will be good weeks, and again, I'll be sending out emails to kind of keep you up to date and to know what's going on. But with that, we are done with the Old Testament, and glad that you have been along for the ride. And again, if you're just beginning, you can go back and pick up and get caught up with us during this month while we take a break. So thanks for being with us this week. And again, I'll just say I'll see you after Easter sometime.